night Voss Whitmore handed his wife a wrapped gift in front of 200 guests and called it something small, since you're not really one for grand things. Delia was already watching from across the room. Not Delia from the file, a different woman entirely. Maren Calloway, 37 years old, wife of Voss Whitmore for 9 years, stood at the edge of the ballroom in a gown she had chosen herself and paid for herself, the way she paid for most things in their life, quietly, without announcement, without expecting anyone to notice. She noticed. She always noticed. The gift was in a slim white box, tied with gold ribbon, and Voss held it out with the kind of smile he reserved for audiences. His father, Bernard Whitmore, 64, retired oilman and self-appointed patriarch of everything, started clapping before Maren even opened it. His mother, Constance, no, that name was taken. His mother, Vera, no. His mother, Elspeth, 61, former socialite and full-time opinion holder, joined in immediately the way she always joined in anything Bernard started. Maren untied the ribbon. Inside was a bracelet. Rose gold, delicate chain, small cluster of stones that caught the light in a way that was designed to impress from a distance. The crowd made the sounds crowds make, soft appreciative murmurs. A few, oh how lovelies from the women who had already had 2 glasses of champagne. Voss leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," he said loud enough for the room to hear. Maren looked at the bracelet for a long moment. Then she looked at Voss. Then she looked at the man standing near the entrance to the ballroom, 40-something, dark jacket, small case at his feet, who she had quietly arranged to be there, because Maren Calloway had not survived 9 years of this marriage by being unprepared. She said, very calmly, "It's beautiful. Do you mind if I have it authenticated first?" The room went very still. Voss laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. "Enticted, Maren, it's a gift, I know," she said. "I just want to be sure. 9 years is a long time to watch someone and say nothing." Maren had come from Harlan, Kentucky, a detail Voss's family had never fully forgiven her for. Not Harlan the person, Harlan the place. The small kind of city that people from certain zip codes learn to say with a slight downward inflection, as though the geography itself were a character flaw. Elspeth had once told a dinner party that Maren was from somewhere in Appalachia, you know how they are, and Voss had laughed, and Maren had taken a sip of her water and thought about compound interest. She had been 38 when she met Voss at a conference in Nashville. He was 39, handsome in the specific way of men who had always been told they were handsome, charming in the specific way of men who had never been told no. He sold commercial real estate. She was there because she had recently, quietly, without much fanfare, taken her late grandmother's investment of $40,000 and turned it into something considerably larger through a jewelry import business she'd built in her spare bedroom. The business was called Auralis. Voss didn't know that. He knew her as Maren, a woman from Kentucky who seemed to have done well enough for herself, who was warm and capable and who laughed at the right moments and never seemed to require anything from anyone. He proposed 8 months later. She said yes. She said yes because she was 38 and she had been alone for a long time, and she thought, she genuinely believed, that Voss was a different kind of man than he turned out to be. She learned otherwise gradually, the way you learn most things that hurt you, slowly, then all at once. The first sign was small. He corrected her grammar at dinner with his parents, once, and then again, and then it became a pattern. The second sign was when he started referring to her business as her little hobby in conversations she wasn't present for, which she learned about later from his sister, Phoebe, 29, the one Whitmore, who occasionally looked at Maren like a full human being. The third sign was a woman named Tilda. Maren found out about Tilda the way wives often find out, not through confrontation, not through dramatic discovery, but through a small detail that didn't fit. A charge on a joint card for a restaurant she hadn't been to. The wrong perfume on a jacket collar, light enough that you might miss it, not light enough that Maren did. She didn't say anything. She filed it away. She started paying closer attention. What she found over the following 3 months was not a single affair, but a pattern of behavior that was in its own way more revealing than any one incident. Voss had a way of making Maren feel small that was almost artful in its subtlety. He never raised his voice. He never said anything that could be clearly pointed to as cruel. He simply, consistently, reliably, made her feel like a footnote in her own life. Meanwhile, Auralis had grown. Not little hobby grown, not she keeps herself busy grown. The company had expanded into wholesale distribution, had contracts with luxury retailers in 6 states, had a design studio in Nashville and a logistics operation in Charlotte. Maren had kept the branding deliberately understated. The name wasn't on anything obvious. The investors who knew through word of mouth and NDA. Bernard Whitmore did not know. Bernard, who had at every single family gathering for 9 years, found a way to mention his own business accolades, who had given Marin unsolicited advice about scaling smart and knowing your who had once told her at Thanksgiving that women in business had to be twice as likable to get half as far. Bernard had spent 2 years recommending Aurelis products to his country club friends without knowing who made them. His wife Elspeth owned 3 Aurelis pieces. His secretary had received an Aurelis gift set from Bernard himself, purchased at a Nordstrom, where Aurelis held an exclusive display contract. Marin knew this. She had known for a while. She had said nothing. The anniversary party had been Voss's idea, which surprised her. 100 guests at the Greystone event space in downtown Charlotte. He'd handled the booking himself, the invitations himself, the seating chart himself. Marin had thought this was a good sign. She had allowed herself to think that she'd stopped allowing herself things like that 6 weeks before the party, when Phoebe had called her on a Tuesday afternoon, voice quiet and careful, and said, "Marin, I don't want to be in the middle of this, but I think you should know. He's been seeing someone for at least a year. Her name is Tilda Oakes. She's going to be at the party." Marin had thanked her sister-in-law. She'd hung up and sat very still at her desk for about 20 minutes. Then she'd opened her laptop and called her attorney, a woman named Ria Sato, 45, who had been her corporate counsel for 4 years and personal attorney for 2. "Tell me where I stand," Marin said. Ria told her. Then Marin called a private investigator she had used once before for a vendor dispute. His name was Callum Drake, and he was methodical and discreet and delivered a 12-page report within 19 days that documented in detail the extent of Voss's activities over the past 14 months. She also called a gemologist. His name was Philip Ames, certified appraiser, member of the American Society of Jewelry Appraisers, 48 years old, and she asked him to be available on the evening of the 14th because she had reason to believe she might need his services. She told him she'd explain when the time came. The time came. Philip Ames stood near the entrance of the Greystone ballroom with his portable loupe and his credentials and his absolute professional composure, and when Marin gestured for him to approach, he crossed the room with the quiet efficiency of a man who had been in this situation before, or at least a version of it. Voss's smile was still on his face, but it had shifted into something more fixed. "Marin," he said, keeping his voice, "what is this?" "I told you," she said pleasantly. "I want to be sure." Bernard Whitmore appeared at Voss's elbow the way he always appeared when things needed managing. He was a large man who moved through spaces like he owned them, and he looked at Philip Ames with the look he gave to service staff and weather forecasts, acknowledging without approving. "What's going on?" Bernard asked. "A quick appraisal," Marin said. "Philip is wonderful. He works with Aurelis." She watched Bernard's expression. He didn't register it. "Not yet." Philip examined the bracelet under the loupe for approximately 90 seconds. He was careful and thorough in the way that only people who have seen a great many things are careful and thorough, and when he set it down, he looked at Marin first, then at Voss, with the mild expression of a man delivering a weather report. "The stones are synthetic," he said. "White topaz, not diamonds. The chain is gold-plated, not solid gold. At retail, the piece is worth somewhere between $40 and $60, possibly less." Someone nearby inhaled sharply. Marin watched it spread across the room, the flicker of comprehension, the slight rearrangement of expressions, the few people who looked at their phones instead of at Voss, which was its own kind of verdict. Voss said, That can't be right. I had it custom." "From where?" Marin asked. He stopped. "It's fine," she said. "I'm not upset," which was true, and somehow that made it worse for him. Voss found her in the corridor outside the ballroom 20 minutes later. He'd pulled at his collar, which was the tell he'd had for 9 years. He pulled at his collar when things stopped going the way he'd planned. He stood in front of her with the particular posture of a man who wasn't sure yet whether to apologize or explain, and he chose incorrectly to start with explaining. "That bracelet cost me $400, he said. The guy said, "Voss, it was a genuine." "Voss," she said his name once more the same way, and he stopped. "I know about Tilda." He looked at her for a very long moment. Then his face did something that she had watched him practice without knowing he was practicing it. It went through the full performance of distress. The jaw setting, the slow exhale, the pained look toward the ceiling. She had seen him use this face with his father when a deal went sideways and with waitstaff when he wanted to send something back without looking difficult. "It's not what you—" "I have a report," she said. He stopped again. 14 months, she said. "Callum Drake, he's very thorough." Voss's mouth opened, closed. You had someone following me. I had someone documenting a pattern of behavior I had already observed," she said, which was technically accurate, and also, she felt, fair. "There's a difference, Marin. I can explain." "I know you can," she said. "You're very good at explaining. But I don't need you to." She had reached into the small evening bag she carried and removed a single envelope. She held it out to him. He looked at it, didn't take it. "What is this?" Ria drew it up, she said. "It's clean. There's no fighting it. There's a prenuptial agreement from 2016 and a postnuptial amendment from 2021 that covers everything acquired during the marriage. Ria will explain the details when you call your attorney, which I'd suggest doing soon." Voss took the envelope. He turned it over in his hands. "I don't understand," he said, and for once she believed that he meant it. "Why tonight?" She considered the question. It was the first real question he'd asked. "Because for 9 years," she said, "you've made sure that anything that mattered happened in front of an audience. I thought it was only fair." He had no answer to that. She didn't wait for one. She went back into the ballroom. The room had reorganized itself in her absence. People were doing the thing they do at events when something significant has happened, and no one is sure how to acknowledge it, which is to hold their drinks more carefully and find fascinating things to look at in the middle distance. Bernard Whitmore was standing near the bar. He had, in the intervening 20 minutes, apparently put something together. Some edge of information had reached him, the way information always reaches men like Bernard eventually, often from sources they'd rather not credit. He watched her come back into the room with a look she hadn't quite seen on him before. "Phoebe told me some things," he said when she reached him. "Phoebe is a good person," Marin said. "She said you're involved with Aurelis." Marin looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "I founded Aurelis." The glass in Bernard's hand didn't quite shake, but it registered, a slight tightening. "In 2014, she continued, "out of my apartment in Nashville, the company currently distributes to 47 retail partners in 11 states. We have a wholesale arm that has been operational since 2018 and a licensing division since 2020. Last fiscal year, we cleared $22 million in revenue." Bernard was very still. "You've recommended our pieces to at least a dozen people," Marin said. "Your wife owns 3 of them. You sent our gift set to your secretary last December." She paused. "We appreciated the business." Bernard set his glass down on the nearest surface. "Why didn't you?" he started. She asked. "Why would I, Bernard? Every time I spoke at this table, you told me to know my lane. Every time I mentioned a business decision, you corrected me. You spent 9 years explaining things to me that I already knew, about industries I was already operating in." She kept her voice pleasant, not angry. She had made her peace with the anger a while ago. "I didn't tell you because there was no version of that conversation where I wouldn't have spent the next decade listening to you take credit for it." Bernard's face went through several transitions. She didn't watch all of them. Elspeth appeared at her husband's elbow. She looked between Marin and Bernard with the careful expression of a woman who has learned, over a long marriage, to read the room before picking a side. "What's happening?" Elspeth asked. "Voss and I are separating," Marin said. "I've already given him the paperwork. Ria Sato will handle the details. You can have your attorney contact her office." Elspeth blinked. "Tonight?" "It was always going to be tonight," Marin said simply. "I was just waiting for the right moment." Phoebe found her near the coat check 40 minutes later. "Are you okay?" Phoebe asked. "I think so." Voss left, Phoebe said. "He went out the side. I saw him on his phone in the parking lot." Marin nodded. "Dad's been quiet," Phoebe added, "which is very unlike him." "It is." Phoebe looked at her with the complicated expression she'd had since the conversation that started all of this. "I didn't know," she said. "About Aurelis, I know," Marin said. "It's all right. Why didn't you tell me?" Marin thought about it. "I didn't tell anyone in this family," she said finally. "Not because I was hiding it, but because when you walk into a room and everyone has already decided what you are, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is decide what you are first." Phoebe didn't say anything. Then she said, "That's the most you've ever said to me in 9 years." "I know," Marin said. "I'm sorry about that." They stood together for a moment in the relative quiet of the corridor, the muffled sounds of the party still audible behind the heavy doors. "What happens now?" Phoebe asked. "Now I go home," Marin said. "Tomorrow I have a call with the design team about the spring line. Next week, Ria files the paperwork. And that's it." Marin thought about the apartment waiting for her. Not the one she'd shared with Voss, not the house in Dilworth they'd bought 3 years ago, but her apartment, the one she'd kept quietly in her name since before the marriage, a habit Voss had mocked as paranoia when he'd found out about it, and which had turned out to be instead simply good judgment. "That's it," she said. She got her coat. She walked out through the front entrance of the Greystone, past the valet stand, past the line of taxis, and turned left toward the parking structure because she had driven herself tonight, the way she drove herself everywhere, the way she had always been better at arriving on her own. Her phone buzzed twice before she reached the car. Both were from Voss. She would read them in the morning, or she wouldn't. She hadn't decided yet, and that was all right. She was learning to be easy about the things that weren't decided. She had spent 9 years deciding everything in advance, filing everything away, preparing for every version of events, and it had served her well, and it had also been exhausting in a way she was only now allowing herself to admit. The spring line was going to be good. The design team had sent her samples last week, a new collection anchored by a rose-cut stone that caught light in a way she found genuinely beautiful, not strategically beautiful, actually beautiful. The difference being something she cared about more than almost anything. She got in the car. She sat for a moment before starting the engine. 9 years was a long time to be quiet about the things that mattered, but she had never confused quiet with empty. She had been building something, steadily, the way things that last are always built. Not with noise, not with announcement, but with patience and intention, and the absolute certainty that the moment would come when she would not need anyone else to speak for her. The moment had come. She started the car, pulled out of the structure, and drove home through the city in the November dark, with the heat on low and the radio off, and for the first time in a very long time, she found that the silence was not something she was enduring. It was simply what she sounded like when she was free.